welcome to Central Christian Church. We're so glad you're with us. Those that are here in the building, finally, and those who are at home that are watching it at home for their safety's sakes. We are so glad that you're joining us this morning. And those that are here, let's stand as we sing our opening song. To God be the glory, great things He has done. So loved He the world that He gave us His Son, who yielded His life and atonement for sin, and opened the life gate that all may go in. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He has done. Oh, perfect redemption, the purchase of blood, to every believer, the promise of God. The vilest offender who truly believes that moment from Jesus the pardon receives. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He has done. Great things He has taught us, great things He has done, and great our rejoicing through Jesus the Son. But purer and higher and greater will be our wonder, our transport when Jesus we see. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He has done. This morning, let's pray together. Our Heavenly Father and our God, we're so happy that we can come into your house again and fellowship with each other. And those who are at home watching, and be with them, keep them safe, Lord. We are practicing our social distancing and wearing masks. And God, we're just so thankful for the responders who have kept us safe and who have provided the necessary needs for so many. Be with those families who have lost loved ones because of the coronavirus. We thank you that we can be in your presence today. Be with us now at this time and throughout the remainder of this day. In Jesus' holy and precious name. When we walk with the Lord in the light of His word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. till all on the altar we lay. For the favor he shows, and the joy he bestows, are for them who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Our communion hymn is the Old Rugged Cross. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. The old rugged cross, so despised by the world, as a wondrous attraction for me. And the dear Lamb of God left his glory on earth to bear it to dark Calvary. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
We're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper right now. Whether you're at home or whether you're here present. And I'm glad that we've been able to meet together. I'm glad that we've been able to meet online. But the symbol of our unity is the sharing of the Lord's table together. Whether you're at home, whether you're here, God is present with us. Wherever we go, we carry around Jesus' sacrifice in our bodies. Because Jesus died for us. On the night in which he was betrayed, Jesus took bread. And when he had broken, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body, broken for you." Body of Christ, broken for you. Then after he had taken the bread, he took a cup. And when he blessed it, he gave it to them, saying, "Take and drink. This is my blood." This represents my blood, the blood of the new covenant shed for the sins of many. And he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." Father in heaven, we thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. We have gathered today in his name to worship, to praise, to honor, to remember, and to have our lives transformed by the living Word. Father, I thank you and praise you for such a great sacrifice, for such a great love. Father, I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I'd like to welcome you. My name's Tom Mansky. If you are watching us online, my name's Tom Mansky. I'm the minister here. Those in the congregation probably know me, and that's great. But here we are worshiping. It is good to be together, whether we're online or whether we're present in the building. I'm so glad that you're here. Yesterday was a very special day. We took part in a covenant ceremony. I had a part in that ceremony. My wife and my children witnessed that ceremony. And there were many people in a church building in Onarga, Illinois, who also witnessed that ceremony. My brother Jim got married for the second time. For 45 years, my brother was faithful to his covenant marriage with Arlene, my sister-in-law. She passed away in 2017, and yesterday my brother went before God and before a group of witnesses and committed himself to being in a covenant relationship with a woman named Susan. By all accounts, she is a fine Christian woman who serves the Lord, who loves the Lord, and just has a sweet spirit about her. And it was such a privilege to be a part of that. But it was a covenant relationship. We tend to think of marriage as a civil contract more than a covenant relationship between God and two people. But that's what a marriage is. In the Bible, a covenant is a promise. It's a contract with a spiritual purpose. There's the old covenant made with God and Moses on behalf of the people of Israel. And then there's a new covenant, which we just celebrated in the taking of the Lord's Supper. Marriage is a covenant between man, a woman, and God. It is a contract with a spiritual purpose. And it's a contract between the husband and wife and God. You go before the Lord and you make a promise to be faithful to each other. The husband promises to be faithful to his wife, and the wife promises to be faithful. And faithful is more than just not cheating on the spouse. It is working to do the best for that other person. And when you do that, surrendering yourself to the Lord, you honor God. One of the best compliments I've ever received happened several years ago. And the person who made this comment and complimented Jen and I was from the state. We were getting licensed to adopt Anthony and David. And what they said to us said it all. She said, it is quite obvious to the people that I talk to and to my eyes that Jennifer and Thomas love each other deeply and are committed to each other deeply and are committed to making each other better. That is what we do in a marriage covenant. We are committed to each other to make each other better, to love, honor, and cherish, and obey. And then what we do is we make that promise before God, and God seals that promise. It was such a great compliment. It still gets me emotional when I think about that. Because I don't always know if what is going on in the marriage, because I'm so close to it, is if it is something that is God honoring and that we're honoring the covenant. This morning we're going to learn about faithfulness to our covenant with God. We're going to learn using the illustration of marriage and divorce. You see what's going on in Malachi is the Israelites were being unfaithful to their covenant with God by being unfaithful to their covenant of marriage. So look on with me to Malachi chapter 2, verse 10. You can follow along on the screen. So how were God's people being unfaithful to their covenant with God? Well, first they married outside of the faith. Verse 10 says this, "Do we not all have one Father? Did not one God create us? Why do we profane the covenant of our ancestors by being unfaithful to one another? Judah has been unfaithful. A detestable thing has been committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. Judah has desecrated the sanctuary the Lord loves by marrying a woman who worshiped a foreign god." Now I want to make this perfectly clear, especially in light of the previous events. This is not a racial thing that God is having a problem with, as in you are profaning the race by marrying outside of it. That's not what God is getting at. What God is getting at is they were marrying people who worship a different God than the God of Israel. You know, the worst mistake we can make is to be involved with a person of the opposite sex who does not hold the same relationship with God as close to them. The worst mistake of my life was getting engaged to a woman who was not a believer. She said, "Oh, I believe in God," but that was it. There was no relationship with Jesus Christ. There was no wanting to grow in that relationship. There was nothing going on spiritually in her life. It was, God is out there somewhere, and I am here, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And I got involved with her because, well, quite honestly, she was attractive. And what happened is, slowly but surely, I began to turn back to my pre-Christian lifestyle. She was leading me farther and farther away from Christ instead of me leading her closer and closer to Jesus. It just didn't happen. And in verse 12, Malachi prays that men who marry women who worship foreign gods, that they would be removed from God's people. That is quite a prayer, because usually we think of a prayer as something that builds somebody up. We ask for healing, we ask for salvation, we ask for provision. But Malachi looks at what's going on in Israel, hears what God calls him to say to them, and he prays this: "As for the man who does this, whoever he may be," and here comes the prayer, "may the Lord remove him from the tents of Jacob, even though he brings an offering to the Lord Almighty." Here's what Malachi is saying. He's saying, Lord, I pray that they be shut out from the people of Israel. You need to remember, Jacob had his name changed. You need to remember what his name change was. It was changed to Israel. And it is from Jacob that the Israelites came. Abraham's the father. Jacob, it went to Isaac, and then to Jacob, the son. And that covenant promise was made to Jacob and Isaac and Abraham. But it came to its fruition in Jacob. And he says, I pray that God removes everyone from the people of God who marries another and who worships a foreign god. Even though they worship at the temple, even though they make a sacrifice, even though they walk in the door of the church, So first, they married outside of the faith. Second, they divorced the wives of their youth. Look at verse 13. Another thing you do, you flood the Lord's altar with tears. You weep and wail because he no longer looks with favor on your offerings or accepts them with the pleasure from your hands. And you ask why? It is because the Lord is witness between you and the wife of your youth. You have been unfaithful to her, though she is your partner, the wife of your marriage covenant. Has not one God made you? You belong to him in body and spirit. Everything you are, you belong to God. And what does God see? Godly offspring. So be on your guard. Do not be unfaithful to the wife of your youth. The man who divorces his wife, says the Lord, the God of Israel, does violence to the one he should protect, says the Lord Almighty. So be on your guard and do not be faithful. So what's going on here is the men were worshiping at the temple. They were making their offerings. And they're saying, God, why aren't you looking with favor on what we're doing? Why aren't you coming through when in the clinch when I need you? And the answer is because they were doing violence to the covenant relationship they made with God, with the family of their wife of their youth, and with themselves. They were breaking that covenant. They were turning their wives and children out into the streets so that they could marry foreign women. Women who could worship, were worshiping foreign gods. Again, it was not a racial thing. It's not because they were marrying foreign women. It was because they were marrying women who did not hold to the same faith. And what happened is they broke the promise they made to God, to their wife, to their family, that they would provide and protect the wife, and they broke it just so they could have their own pleasure. But it didn't stop their religious practice. They still showed up and did what they were supposed to do, still going to the temple, still offering the sacrifices, still worshiping just like they always did. If they were alive and well today, they would be singing "Just As I Am" as the closing song and leaving just as they were. Because there was no repentance, there was no wanting to fulfill the covenant other than just making a checklist of what they had accomplished on their own. There's no relationship. Remember, a covenant relationship is a covenant with the other person and God. What the men of Malachi's day considered faithfulness was really their own selfishness in the wrapping of religious routine. They were saying, I'm going to make this sacrifice so that you will do what I want, God. You are my vending machine. I'm going to put the sacrifice in here and down here. I'm going to get what I desire. No connection, no relationship. And they were wondering, why aren't you answering my prayer? Why aren't you looking at my sacrifice with favor? They were saying, I'm being faithful to the Mosaic covenant, to the covenant with Moses. I'm being so faithful. I gave my wife a certificate of divorce. That's what you said do. See? They honored God with their lips, but their hearts were far from God. The men were feigning faithfulness to God, but in their hearts they were just selfish. And Malachi calls them on it. God, through that messenger, calls them on it. You see, the covenant with God made the people of Israel God's special possession. And that special possession was meant to be a kingdom of priests, serving the word, proclaiming God's faithfulness and justice to all peoples. Notice what verse 15 says. It says that the people of Israel belong to God, heart and soul. And the men were saying, I'm being faithful. Well, my heart and my soul are somewhere else because I want what I want. But I'm being faithful. I'm checking off the boxes. Go to worship, make the sacrifice. We might say, go to worship, take the Lord's Supper. I've been baptized. I take the Lord's Supper every week. We checked off all the boxes, but there's no covenant relationship. For the men, it was just all about showing up so that they could go and do what they want to do. They were trying to appease God rather than have a relationship with God, as well as their wife, the wife of their youth. And God says, if you're not faithful to that covenant marriage, you're not being faithful to me. So God says, you're not fooling me. I see what you're doing, and I stand as a witness against you. But there's still hope. You know, verse 16, that last part, gives us the hope that we need. This is where we need to live as followers of Jesus, as God's people, the church. The last part of verse 16 says, so be on your guard and do not be unfaithful. What does that mean to be on your guard? Well, first it means to connect to God's story. Connect to God's story. The people of Malachi's day were not connected to God's story. They were connected to a place, and they were connected to a routine. And being connected to a place and a routine is not faithfulness. It's not connectedness. It is an abomination. It's idolatry. They're thinking, as long as I show up to the place and perform the ritual, I am faithful to the covenant. I can go and do whatever I want. And God says no. You see, God's story is more of a love story than a story of checking off boxes on a to-do list. John 3:16 tells that story. As only Jesus Christ can tell it. The Son of God can tell it. It begins that it says that God so loved the world. Not just a part of the world. Not just what I want to build as my world, but the world. God created the world and everything in it, and God created man in His image. Male and female, God created them. And instead of enjoying a close relationship with God, God's image bearers turned their back on God and sinned. They broke the command of God. When you break the command, when you choose to disobey, what you're saying is, I don't love you enough to do what you've asked of me. But they broke that command, and they poisoned God's good creation, and death was introduced to God's good world as a result of that sin. The wages of sin is death. The gift of God is eternal life. Is there hope? Yes, there is. But then if it wasn't bad enough that they had broken that close relationship, that covenant relationship with God, then man turned on each other. And they were murdering each other, and slandering, dealing treacherous with each other, and debasing their relationship with God and others. God so loved the world that He did what? That He gave His one and only Son. That whoever believes in Him should never perish. In other words, they should not feel the consequences of sin. They should not experience the consequences of sin, the ultimate consequences of going to hell, being separated from God forever, for all eternity. You see, it's easy to go through the motions in church. It's easy to go through the motions in a marriage, in that covenant relationship. It's easy to go through the motions of worship. But going through the motions, checking off the boxes on a to-do list is not faithfulness. What spouse wants to be involved in a relationship? Well, I talked to my wife about my day. Check. Oh, I said goodnight. Check. I prayed for her. Check. Oh, I have a date scheduled with her next Tuesday in 3 months. Check. What spouse wants to be in that type of relationship? Because it's not a relationship, it's just a business arrangement. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall never perish but have eternal life. There is a relationship, a love relationship, a covenant relationship. And faithfulness on God's part to that covenant is shown in and through Jesus Christ. And our faithfulness to that covenant with God and with each other as his people is shown in the same way that Jesus showed his faithfulness. Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8 says this, that we are to have this attitude in yourself, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Did you notice what the first phrase was? Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. This is how you live in a covenant relationship. You live that out by emptying yourself. Your partner, your marriage partner, your husband or your wife lives this out by emptying themselves, by sacrificing for God and for the other person. Each person, as I said in the message I gave at my brother's wedding yesterday, each person not giving, well, here's 10% or 20% or even 50%. No, each person giving 100% to that relationship, both to your spouse and to the Lord God, whom you belong to, body and soul. We need to be connected to that story, that love story that God so loved me, that he gave his Son, that I might live and experience eternal life. We need to be connected to that story. That's faithfulness to the covenant. We're connected to God's story, and then we connect others to God's story. You know, in the first chapter of Malachi, way back in the beginning of this sermon series, God says to tell Israel, God says to tell his people, my name will be great among the nations, where the sun rises to where it sets. In other words, all over the world, wherever the sun rises and the sun sets, there are going to be pure offerings brought to me, because my name will be great among the nations, says the Lord Almighty. If you are connected to God's story, it is only because someone came and connected you to God's story. You don't get connected by yourself. Someone comes alongside of you and connects you. That person in my life was my brother's first wife, Arlene. I called her up. You've heard the story if you've been around here, but I'll give a synopsis. I called my brother up one afternoon, and he was gone. He was working, and my sister-in-law answered the phone, and she says, "Tom, how are you doing?" And she's so happy to talk with me, and she says, "When was the last time you went to worship?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of not a churchy person, Arlene. I don't know if you remember what I look like. I have hair down the middle of my back. I have a long ZZ top beard, and I just don't think people are going to accept me walking into a church for going to worship." Well, I know a church it would, and I kind of I remember rolling my eyes, and she said, "Why don't you go there?" And I said, "I don't know anybody." "We'll come and we'll go with you." I'm not going to get out of this, am I? I remember thinking that. I'm not going to get out of this. And finally, she just wouldn't take no for an answer. And I went. And it was, you ever seen dry, cracked ground? Just earth that has been baked by the sun. And all of a sudden the rain comes and saturates that ground. And all of a sudden everything becomes connected. And the earth is back together. It's no longer dry, but it's fertile. That's what it was like sitting in that worship service. My sister-in-law came alongside of me and connected me to God's story. And then the people at the church I went to connected me to God's story. It was understandable. I got it. I could understand what they were saying. They were not speaking in King James. They were speaking in a way that I could understand. And they connected me to God's story. If you're connected to Jesus Christ, there's someone that just popped into your mind that connected you to God's story. You need to be that person for a myriad of people in your life. It occurs to me that what God wrote through his servant Jude in verse 23 is what my brother and his covenant partner, Arlene, did for me. Jude 23 says this: save others. In this case, it was me. Save others by snatching them. In this case, it was me from the fire. My brother and my sister-in-law, as well as the people at that community, intended Parkville alone, saved me by snatching me from the fire. So connect to God's story. Connect others to God's story. We must be on guard. We must connect with God and with others. Be faithful to your covenant with God or to yourself and to your partner. Be faithful. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. We have gathered here today in his name to worship, to lift up the name of Jesus, whether we are watching online or whether we are present in this building. Father, we have connected with you, and I pray that we've connected with your story, the story of God loving the world and giving his Son that whoever believes in Jesus Christ shall never perish and have eternal life. Father, may we be faithful and be on guard, be faithful to the covenant, that being connected and staying connected to God's story, and connecting others to God's story. Father, I thank you and I praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. It has been good to worship with you today, whether it's online or whether here present at the church building. Go now. Be connected to God and connect others to God's story.